So the Puppet Master said we can't leave the Promoverse until we do a build tutorial, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to
Oh my god, nobody cares, Bob. Just show them how to build it. I want to go home.
I'm naming this thing the Bobsled. So this whole thing is actually pretty simple. The first thing you're going to want to do is find some flat ground because the rails have to be the same height. Now just decide what direction you want the slide to go in and place the first pillar. I find the thin pillars are a lot easier to deal with. This bit is super important, just strafe to the right. Do not turn, do not walk forward. This has to be perfect or the whole thing will fall apart. Now make sure you can't walk through the two pillars and just build up as high as you want to go. Now you can add the rails to the top of the pillars. I'd recommend starting with the less steep incline. We'll go into why a bit later. Now you can see it'll get to a point where it can't go any further, but that's okay, we'll fix that in a second. And you just want to give it a test to make sure it slides okay, and we can move on to the next step. It's really important that everything from this point onwards needs to be a snap. The whole thing is basically two separate structures placed right next to each other. Start by snapping the foundations to the outside of the pillars like this. But be careful you don't snap to the wrong foundation. These things need to stay separate the whole way down the line. It doesn't matter if they go to different heights as long as they are snapped together. You're going to have to clear any resources that are in the path of the foundations, so if you have control of the server settings, I would turn harvest health down to 0 and turn on disable structure placement collision. Now I didn't do that in this build, just to show that it can be done on any server regardless of settings, and while I'm doing this in creative mode, it's entirely possible to do it without any cheats. Eventually you're probably going to end up at a wall like this that won't let you snap another foundation. So we just snap a pillar to it, go up, and attach a ceiling. Now this is very important, make sure the ceiling follows the same line as the rest of the foundations. This is really easy to accidentally mess up and can cause a lot of issues down the line. Once you get over the obstacle, just snap a pillar to the ceiling and back down to the ground. Then snap another foundation to the pillar and continue down the line. You could do the whole thing with pillars and ceilings if you wanted, but it's a lot quicker to just snap one foundation after another rather than placing multiple pillars each time. You'll need to do this for both starting pillars, and once again be careful not to snap to the wrong foundation. This gap needs to run the whole length of the slide. Now this is something cool that you couldn't do in ASE. When you get a ceiling to the right height, you can actually snap a foundation directly to the ceiling without needing a pillar to attach to. Using this method you can build a single structure that spans the entire map. Just make sure that it's all snapped together. I highly recommend you do this in sections because you don't want to get halfway across the map and realize you messed up a snap somewhere along the line. So once you've done a section of base, start adding the rails. I'm actually going to change these to very steep rails to give us a bit more speed at the start, but this does cause some problems which you'll see in a second. Before we go any further, we'll give it a little test to make sure we're on the right track. And as you can see, we bounce straight off. Now this only happens on the angled rails, it's not a problem once you get to the straight rails, but we'll need to build up some momentum first, so we need to find a solution, which brings us to stop us from falling off, we need to add some guardrails. To achieve this, we just snap a quarter ceiling to one of the starting rails, and then add a pillar, and this will give us our anchor point for the first guardrail. For the other guardrail, we want to attach a quarter ceiling to the top of the other pillar, 2 quarter walls down, 3 more quarter ceilings, and add another pillar for the second anchor point. After which you should end up with something that looks like this. Now you can go ahead and add a couple more ceilings to the top for your starting platform. Just keep adding the guardrails down until you get to the flat section. So we'll just give this a test and we still bounce off. To fix this, we just add another row of guardrails to get us to the right height. Too high seems to work fine for this slide. How high the guardrails need to be will depend on how long the drop is and how high you bounce. As you can see on my first slide, I had to go very high to contain the bounce. As I said, this is only for the first drop. Once you build up enough momentum and you get to the flat rail sections, you won't need any more guardrails. Okay, so full disclosure, after I'd filmed this whole tutorial and built the wooden slide, I started building another slide for our next video, and I discovered that for some reason stone railings don't actually have this problem, which to be honest is a hell of a lot easier, and I wish I knew that when I first started. However, stone does have some other issues which I'll go into later in the video, but if it's your first slide or it's not very long, I would probably go with stone. If you want to achieve Captain Fat Dog's famous Sloom from ASE, this is really all you need. Just put a chair on the starting platform and this will allow you to load up with resources, launch off, and parachute back to your base. This is obviously a lot less building than a full slide, and it's probably the smarter way to do it if all you're trying to do is easily transport resources. Now, if you want to add obstacles to the track like dinosaurs or tunnels, you need to build up from the base, because the only thing that will snap to railing is more railing. Just attach a pillar to your base and build up to the rails, put a platform, and you can add whatever you want to make it more interesting. Look, obviously you aren't really meant to be able to do this in Ark, so it's not perfect and you will run into random issues along the way. For example, I discovered while building this slide that if you go from flat rails to the less steep down ramp rails, this will happen. And this only happens with wood, it isn't a problem with metal or stone. You can fix this by using extra steep followed by less steep down rails. Another one that really baffled me when I first came across it, I was building a line and all of a sudden I couldn't place another rail, even though I knew I had all of the base connected together properly. Turns out there's a max height you can build above each foundation before it'll stop you from placing any more pieces. The way to fix this is go back a few rails and start going down on a steeper curve so that you get closer to the ground and you can continue on with your line. Unfortunately, other problems are not so easy to overcome. As I mentioned earlier, there is an issue with stone where you get these unpredictable slowdown points. It doesn't happen at the same place on the track and it doesn't happen all the time. It's just completely random and it's not something that can be fixed. Now this does occasionally happen with wood and metal, but nowhere near as often as with stone. If you watched our previous video, you may remember this jump over the T-Rex using an up ramp. I do not recommend doing this because although it was cool, 9 times out of 10, this is what happens. I tried everything I can think of and I could not get this to be consistent. Trust me, it's not worth the hassle. You will also go randomly flying off the side of the rail for no reason, but it is worth noting that you can actually control your character while they're in the air and land back on the track. Look, none of these things are really a big problem if all you're doing is building it for fun in creative mode, because you can just fly back to the start and try again. But I wanted you all to be aware of this in case you're trying to do it legit on a server where you might waste time on something that doesn't quite work. And now it's time for the fun bit where you actually get to ride your new slide. I'm going to do this one with a slot cap of metal and no creative mode, just to prove it's possible to use this for function. Oh, and if you're one of those people that complained about the music in the last video, you're probably going to want to hit that mute button right about now.
Could you whisper in my ear the things you want to feel? I'll give you anything. Feel it coming. Do you wake up on your own? I wonder where you are. Live with all your faults. I wanna wake up where you are. I won't say anything at all. So why don't you slide? The life you killed. The priest is on the phone. Your father hit the wall.
This was fun. We should do it again sometime.